we'll go ahead and shift gears here, and we're going to get into the contamination side of what we're talking about today. When I first started getting into real estate transactions on a personal level, me going out, buying and selling individual real estate parcels myself, I had never really been in the commercial real estate space. So once we started doing those transactions, one of the first things that happened prior to us closing our first deal was what's called a phase one report. I wasn't familiar with what that was. I bought and sold several houses by this time. Never heard of a phase one report. Once I transacted on my first commercial real estate property, I learned that the phase one report is essentially required, not necessarily required, but it's a very basic due diligence checkbox when you're transacting on larger pieces of property or special commercial real estate, industrial real estate, things like that. And what that phase one report essentially does is it tells you what the likelihood of hydrocarbon contamination is on your property. So that could be anything from an abandoned oil and gas well, that could be a toxic spill, that could be an abandoned storage tank that could have been storing gasoline, diesel, acid, things like that. All of these things that I just referenced are not really, you can't really see them when you're driving across the property, when you're walking across the property. You don't know about any of these things because they're below the surface, right? So that's where data comes in. And this is typically why I had never had experience dealing with houses, things like that with phase one reports. It never really hit the interest level of either my lender, my insurance company, me as the buyer, or me as the seller. So I'd already transacted on multiple properties and I was completely unaware of some of those different factors that I just mentioned. Maybe my property sits on top of an abandoned oil and gas field. Maybe I'm getting ready to buy a piece of property that's sitting right next to an abandoned storage tank that spilled and it was storing diesel or something like that. I had no idea that the properties that I was transacting on could have these potential risks to them. And the reason for that, it's really interesting. I still don't understand this part of it, is why there's such a disconnect between residential real estate, transacting on single family homes, things like that, and then the commercial real estate space where something like a phase one report is required. What we've done at LandGate is we've pulled all of that data. So every single abandoned oil and gas well in the United States, we have it in our system. We have it in LandApp. I'm going to show you what that looks like here in a little bit. We have every single underground storage tank, what it was storing, whether it spilled. We have every single toxic contamination site in the United States. It's in LandApp. We also have every Superfund site in the United States. We have all of these pieces of data in LandApp. But before I start showing you the data, I want you to understand that we don't just put pieces of data on a map and expect you to understand what are the implications on your property. We look at each and every individual site and we go through it with an engineering type analysis. That's my background. We have many data scientists and engineers who work for us. We look at every little piece of information. If it's an abandoned oil and gas well, we look at the vintage, what the year was on that well, whether it was plugged and abandoned correctly, whether there's other implications that could have led to a leak, and we score that individual site in relation to all of the others that could be around the property, including the underground storage tanks, including the Superfund sites and all of those different things. So we've put all of this together and we've simplified it down to giving you an index score of 0 to 100. In the risk side, do you need to worry about these types of risks?